Lightsabers, spaceships, and the Force have captured the imaginations of millions, including some of the most brilliant creative minds of our time.
Star Wars.
Star Wars. Star Wars.
Revolutionary authors like Brandon Sanderson, epic filmmakers like Peter Jackson, and Christopher Nolan have all been influenced by George Lucas to some degree. But who influenced George Lucas? Star Wars seems sleek and modern, but it's actually primordial. In a way, Star Wars is like a dry stone wall. Dry stone walls aren't made by mortar, but are fitted together. Each stone holds the other up, and gravity works as a binding glue. The same way, Star Wars has been crafted from ancient archetypes and molded by 10 key individuals, masters of the ancient art of storytelling. But now Star Wars rests in the hands of new owners. And while the dry stone wall is durable,
why are you smashing the wall down? It's not your f***ing wall. Then leave it the f*** alone then. Then leave the wall alone. It's a dry stone wall. It's been up for hundreds of years. Dry stone wall, hundreds of years. Cost thousands of pounds per metre to put it right. And you think you can come around here and smash a hole in it because you want to get through? Walk down there, there's a gap in the wall down there. Walk through that one.
just like this reckless man gave no heed to the ancient wall and saw it not as a sacred relic, but an obstacle. George Lucas's work and his expanded universe were also considered by Disney to be an obstacle, and Disney executives only wished to tear it down. While we can't erase the Disney films, we can remember what makes Star Wars great: age-old archetypes, expressive art, and cutting-edge visual effects. We will first examine the foundational pillar, the firm structure which gave Star Wars shape. Perhaps you think this backbone was Isaac Asimov or some master in science fiction, but surprisingly that is the opposite of the truth. George Lucas struggled to bring his script to life, but while reading a book called A Hero with a Thousand Faces, George learned about something called the Monomyth. Mythologist Joseph Campbell examined the ancient stories of Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Joseph Campbell argues that while on the surface the story of Hercules and Buddha seem different, they're actually the same. Joseph Campbell believed in the monomyth, this idea that all legends are the same story, but expressed in different ways. He believed that all heroes went on something called the hero's journey. The hero's journey is the ancient recipe that brings characters to life. It starts out with the call to adventure, a moment the hero is offered a mythical quest.
You must learn the ways of the Force, if you're to come with me to Alderaan.
Of course, the hero can't just join the quest.
I can't get involved. I've got work to do.
He's got a life of his own, and he can't just abandon his obligations. But something strong-arms the budding hero, and he decides to embark on his quest. In the process, he is consumed by doubt, darkness, and suffering, swallowed into the belly of the whale. The youthful, ignorant boy is consumed and killed, and a seasoned hero emerges in his place. This is a blueprint that has shaped the most enduring myths. The monomyth, or the hero's journey, is the ancient wall which these vandals seek to destroy. While Luke Skywalker struggled just to lift up a lightsaber after being trained by the legendary masters Yoda and Obi-Wan, without any training, Rey wasn't only able to lift a lightsaber, but also swipe it away from the hands of a Force user. Luke's story was a personal conflict.
You must confront Vader.
Luke wasn't destroying evil.
I know there is good in you. The Emperor hasn't driven it from you fully.
But restoring the light. Rey, on the other hand, embarked on a mystery box-filled journey. I'm not really sure where it led us, but I guess the journey's over. It's very clear that Joseph Campbell's work functioned as the first foundational brick in the Star Wars story. It is the foundation and the spine, but you need more than a foundation to build a wall, and more than a spine to have a working body. You also need arms and legs. You need an entire skeleton. And the rest of the Star Wars skeleton comes from a land very distant from George's home in Modesto, California, from a land which had not yet been polluted with factories or littered with telephone poles. Imperial Japan, as depicted by the legendary filmmaker Akira Kurosawa. I remember as a kid having a strange epiphany and realizing that Star Wars was about two knights rescuing a princess from a castle. But Jedi aren't just knights, they're also monks. The samurai depicted in Akira Kurosawa's film The Hidden Fortress shared many similarities with the Jedi. Many scholars have noticed a strong link between Buddhism and the Jedi. Buddhists, like the Jedi, reject certain attachments and pleasures. We can even look at Yoda's and Obi-Wan's ascension as a sort of nirvana. There's also a strong tie to Taoism, with the light and the dark side bearing a strong resemblance to the concept of yin and yang. The Hidden Fortress also focuses on a warrior princess named Yuki, and the seasoned general Makabe Rukurota. Just as the Jedi Order was destroyed, Yuki's clan had all been but annihilated. The General Rukurota, like Obi-Wan, was now a Ronin. Both Obi-Wan and the General Rukurota were seeking to restore their clan. That is why Luke became a Jedi, not only to fulfill his own destiny, but to restore Obi-Wan and Yoda's legacy. This is why it stings to see Luke devolve into a washed-up loser. He not only failed to fulfill his dreams, but those of Obi-Wan and Yoda. Disney was smashing a sledgehammer against an age-old story of growth and redemption. Some are only capable of destroying. Perhaps that's what makes George Lucas's Star Wars so brilliant. Crafting a living narrative is difficult work, and it requires many pieces. So far we have discussed the skeleton, the main inspirations for the Star Wars narrative. But a skeleton doesn't live. Star Wars needed muscular depth to give it weight. Much of this muscular depth came from one particular artist, Jean Giraud, or Moebius. Moebius left an incredible mark on the characters and cityscapes of Star Wars. Moebius brought a surreal scale and scene to his comics. You weren't just looking at some simplistic cookie-cutter idealized version of the future, where everything is chrome, but a vibrant yet grungy world, with beggars, thieves, wealthy elites, adventurers, and daring rogues. In a sense, the future was horrifying, not because it was alien, but because it was real. While skimming through Moebius's Long Tomorrow, you'll find yourself on Coruscant. You'll also meet a Gamorrean guard, and those little droids from the Phantom Menace. And speaking of the Phantom Menace, George would later hire Moebius to depict a scene from Star Wars, and this is what he drew. Another visual artist added a dark grit to Star Wars. Frank Frazetta dominated the pulp comic and fantasy spaces, shaping the landscape which generations of new artists would tread on. Frank sculpted muscular figures as if with dirt and sweat, powerful heroes thrashing villains with savage dominance, and seductive women draped in shadow and mystery. Frank's work echoes in some of the most iconic characters and costumes. Frank explained that George Lucas cited his famous Funnies covers as an inspiration for Chewbacca, and some of the shots of the Death Star. However, there are still some key differences between Frazetta's work and Star Wars. Frazetta's heroes were sculpted in rock-hard muscle. Physically, Luke was an average young man, and hardly seemed intimidating. Yet, like Frazetta's characters, Luke thrusts himself deep into the bone-cracking action, and in The Return of the Jedi, he carries a dark fantasy weight. George Lucas would later go on a fanboy-esque pilgrimage to meet the artist. According to Frank Frazetta's granddaughter, she said that,
according to my grandmother, sometime around 1979, Ed Summers brought George to East Stroudsburg to meet and spend the day with Frank. They got along quite well, and at some point during his visit, Lucas mentioned that my grandfather's art had been one of his many influences for Star Wars, which flattered him tremendously.
While Moebius and Frazetta were key in shaping the atmosphere and tone, there was still a looming problem. George wasn't writing a comic book, he was making a film. How would George bring these characters to life? Ray Harryhausen, a pioneer in visual effects, learned how to utilize perspective and stop motion to craft stunning breathing monsters. Harryhausen's films include A Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Jason and the Argonauts, The Voyage of Sinbad, and so many more. These films fueled a young George Lucas's imagination and opened his eyes to the incredible possibilities of film. Harryhausen didn't just inspire George to create Star Wars, but also to found ILM. George attempted to hire Ray Harryhausen to produce the stop-motion scenes in Star Wars. While Ray declined, his techniques were utilized to animate several scenes in The New Hope. George spoke fondly of Ray's work at his passing, saying that without him there likely would have been no Star Wars. Ray's Cyclops from The Voyage of Sinbad was a chief inspiration for the Rancor, and the animators who brought the Tauntauns and Walkers to life in An Empire Strikes Back were utilizing Ray's techniques. Ray was an unofficial consultant who helped George Lucas logistically figure out how to create and budget his stop-motion scenes. Ray wasn't just an artistic pillar, but a key logistical one too. Perhaps that's why George Lucas felt so grateful for him. Some of my favorite scenes from Star Wars are inspired by Harryhausen. While they weren't fundamental in the narrative, they were necessary in shaping the vast scope of the Star Wars universe. Because of Ray's techniques, we got in Chewbacca's high-stake game of Dejarik, or hollow chess. Did you know that George Lucas said he'd personally tear your arms out of their sockets if you disrespected Ray Harryhausen's legacy in film? Nowadays, many films center around spaceships and aliens. But in George Lucas's time, there were only a few films that sort of captured the detailed and complex space travel that George Lucas had imagined.
To be very honest, there was no context other than 2001, which was really science fiction. And Kubrick did that, sort of first quality, enough time, enough money to do it however he wanted, and he was a genius. And I didn't think that anybody was going to make a better science fiction film than that. So I sort of went and began to focus on space opera.
That's why George Lucas attempted to recruit Douglas Trumbull from the Space Odyssey 2001. Douglas declined the offer. George's team also tried to utilize many of Trumbull's techniques when they set their spaceships into action. Now that we've established the structural framework and the visual aesthetics and scope, let's talk about the heartbeat, the energy behind the films. When Ewan McGregor learned about the name of Episode 2, he had an extremely shocking reaction.
I actually broke the news to Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, about the new title of the upcoming Star Wars movie.
Oh, what was it? What was it?
Attack of the Clones.
Was it?
Attack of the Clones.
Is that real?
Yes. What do you think about that?
I don't know about that.
Ewan was surprised by their dramatic title, a style that George had picked up from pulp comics, shows, and novels, like John Carter created by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and Flash Gordon created by Alex Raymond. These pulp stories were brimming with high-octane action and fiery romances with scantily clad spacewomen. This was the same energy George wanted to capture in Star Wars. Now we can hear the heartbeat of Star Wars, but the film is still missing its voice. Going back to the dry stone analogy, a key component needed to hold the wall together is gravity. Similarly, John Williams' scores are the weight and gravity that binds the images and narrative together into one exhilarating adventure. George Lucas asked John Williams to turn to Holst's The Planets, and more specifically the song Mars Bringer of War, for inspiration for the film score. When you listen to the soundtrack of A New Hope, you hear the whispers of Holst's ghost. Just take a quick listen to a few segments to see what I mean. Now, if you have been counting, we're only at 9 pillars, and you may be wondering who the 10th one is. And it's you, the Star Wars fans who've turned George Lucas's work into an enduring cultural phenomenon. George Lucas didn't make Star Wars so he could watch it alone in his mom's basement. He was motivated to share something with people who wanted an epic story, brimming with action and groundbreaking effects. And going back to my previous analogy about the dry stone wall, you aren't just a capstone which seals the wall off and keeps the whole structure from falling, you are also the guardian protecting the wall from vandals by remembering the difference between a sacred relic and corporate product. Only you ensure the craft survives.
You're my only hope.
Hit the like button and subscribe now, and your journey to the dark side will be complete.